Welcome back to Bombastic Nation and ting. Back with some more vibes for you. I'm Mr. Giant, and we're going ahead with Napoleon's Marshal. Saint-Cyr, Oudinot, Victor, and Murat. Looks like that's what we're going to be looking at here and ting. You know what I mean? I'm excited. Yes, You know what I mean? Keep the comments coming. Keep suggesting those videos, man. And I'm watching them. And they coming. You know what I mean? Also hit that notification bell so you know whenever I am set putting out videos, because I put out extra stuff too. You know what I mean? And some people said they're not getting notifications, but make sure you hit that red notification bell so you know when I put out videos and things. But let me not talk for too long. I'm glad you guys are here. I'd say welcome, but hey, you're already here, and we all cool and thing. Let's go ahead and YouTube and simmer and see what's going on here with these four marshals on the scene. Let's YouTube and simmer all here. Part 3.
Terror belli, decus pacis. Terror in war, ornament in peace. The words inscribed on every French marshal's baton. In France, the title of Marshal or Maréchal goes back at least to the 13th century. It represents the highest possible position of military authority. Authority symbolized by a marshal's baton. The title was abolished during the French Revolution as incompatible with the egalitarian spirit of the age. But in 1804, Napoleon founded a new empire and restored the ancient rank. This is Epic History TV's guide to Napoleon's Marshals.
Napoleon's Marshals, y'all.
All 26 have been ranked according to our own evaluation of their achievements as marshals, with expert guidance from Lieutenant Colonel Remy Porte, former chief historian of the French Army. So far, we've met Marshals Perignon, Brune, Serrurier, Kellerman, Grouchy, Moncey, Poniatowski, Jourdan, Bernadotte, Augereau, Lefebvre, Mortier, and Marmont.
Marmont is my favorite so far. Marmont is my favorite so far. I ain't gonna even lie to you. I like him.
Blinkist is here to help solve a big problem for many of us. So many books, so little time. So Blinkist has distilled more than 3,000 works of non-fiction into Blinks, 15-minute summaries of a book's key.
Let's skip this.
Thanks again to Blinkist for sponsoring this video. 13. Marshal Saint-Cyr.
Saint-Cyr. Oh, I said Saint-Cyr. Marshal Saint-Cyr. All right. He's the best man among us in the line of defense, though I am superior to him in attack. See, Napoleon have to go, hey, you good. Don't get it twisted, though. I'm better. Napoleon is always like letting them know, I'm the man. You understand what I mean? You're good, but you ain't no me.
Gouvion Saint-Cyr was a gifted student who ran away from a miserable childhood to become an artist. A passionate Republican, he embraced the French Revolution and later volunteered for military service. Though proud and aloof by nature, his Republican politics and sharp intellect ensured he was elected captain of his company. His skill at drawing enemy positions then got him noticed by General Custine, who gave him a job on his staff. During these turbulent early years of the revolution, Custine was one of several generals who was punished for defeat with a trip to the guillotine.
Whoa!
Saint-Cyr's instinctive grasp of warfare, brilliant planning and tactics won him promotion from volunteer to general of division in 2 years. An even more remarkable achievement, as he'd had no formal military training. But his cold, analytical approach meant that he was always a respected leader, rather than loved. After 5 years' service with the Army of the Rhine, he was sent to Italy. At the disastrous Battle of Novi, he commanded the French right wing, but skillfully extricated his troops from the debacle. The next year he was back on the Rhine and won a brilliant victory over the Austrians at Biberach. But a bitter dispute with his commander, General Murat, encouraged rumours that Saint-Cyr was impossible to work with. Saint-Cyr believed soldiers should not meddle in politics and did not support Napoleon's
I believe
seizure
that
of
too.
power in
Like you, bruh.
1789. Nor did he show much enthusiasm for Napoleon's decision to crown himself emperor 5 years later. His political views cost him dearly. Saint-Cyr was sidelined for several years, while less able generals were made marshals. In 1805, he commanded French forces in central Italy. But when he was made
He didn't want to kiss that ring too much.
a man whom he personally detested, he returned to Paris, even when Napoleon threatened to have him shot for desertion. In 1808, Saint-Cyr was given command of a corps for the invasion of Spain, but his failure to take Girona meant he was relieved of command. Leaving in a fury before his replacement, Marshal Oudinot, had arrived, he was nearly court-martialed again for desertion.
That dude, he don't care.
Saint-Cyr's military talent, however, was not in doubt. In 1812, he was recalled for the Russia campaign, with command of 6th Bavarian Corps. His role was to support Marshal Oudinot in guarding the northern flank of the French salient. When Wittgenstein's Russians attacked at Polotsk, Oudinot was wounded, and Saint-Cyr took over command, turning probable defeat into a brilliant victory. For this achievement, Napoleon awarded Saint-Cyr his Marshal's baton. But 2 months later, at a second Battle of Polotsk, Saint-Cyr was attacked by a larger Russian army, seriously wounded in the foot and forced to pull back. His injury meant he missed the worst horrors of the Russian retreat, but he contracted typhus early in 1813 and was sick for many months.
That's just something you don't hear about typhus.
Grande Armée in August, taking command of 14th Corps and the defense of Dresden.
Does anybody get typhus anymore?
This was the first and only time that he worked directly alongside the Emperor, and both soon learned new respect for each other's abilities. Saint-Cyr's skilled defense of Dresden set the stage for Napoleon's great victory there later that month. But Saint-Cyr was incredulous when Napoleon later ordered him to remain in Dresden, while other forces concentrated for the decisive Battle of Leipzig, 60 miles to the west. Napoleon's defeat at Leipzig meant that Saint-Cyr and other garrisons in the east were cut off and had to surrender that autumn. Saint-Cyr took no part in the 100 Days, determined to keep out of France's political disputes. Under the restored monarchy, he served as Minister of War and tried, but failed, to save Marshal Ney from the death penalty. He also struggled to enact military reforms in the face of royalist opposition, eventually resigning in disgust and retiring to his country estate. Marshal Saint-Cyr remains one of the great what-ifs of the Napoleonic Wars, an extremely able commander sidelined for his politics, who might well have proved one of Napoleon's very best marshals.
I like that dude. No politics, he says. You know, I ain't getting involved. I ain't kissing the ring. You know what I mean? I'll tell you, this is how I feel, and I'm gonna move on. I like that trait in this dude here, even though it stifled his progress in the military. And you know, you have to play the political game to get ahead if you in certain segments of society. You know what I mean? You have to play the political game. He didn't. I admire him for doing that. Didn't play the game. Had a less than stellar career, but you know, I bet his conscience was okay.
12. Marshal Oudinot.
Oh, this one is short and sweet. A decent fellow, but not very bright. Napoleon, man. I'm still better than you, brother. Okay, let's see what's going on with Oudinot here.
Nicolas Oudinot ran away to join the army aged 17, but his father dragged him home 3 years later to help run the family business. When the revolution began, he volunteered for the National Guard and was promoted to major. In the wars that followed, he served with the Army of the Rhine, always in the thick of the fighting, rapidly promoted and frequently wounded, a habit for which he became celebrated. In 1799, he was promoted to General of Division and sent to Switzerland to serve as General Massena's new Chief of Staff, a role he performed to perfection. Serving with General Brune in Italy, he led a cavalry charge against an Austrian battery at the Battle of Monzembano, sabering gunners and capturing one cannon himself, a feat for which Napoleon awarded him a Sword of Honor. In 1805, the newly crowned Emperor Napoleon gave Oudinot command of an elite grenadier division formed from the tallest, strongest soldiers in the army. In December that year, at the Battle of Austerlitz, Oudinot insisted on leading the division in person, despite having been shot in the thigh 2 weeks earlier. His grenadiers were kept in reserve for most of the battle, but saw heavy fighting in the latter stages, as Napoleon completed the destruction of the Allied left wing. At the Siege of Danzig in 1807, General Oudinot's division had the unusual distinction of capturing an enemy warship, a British sloop that had run aground trying to resupply the city. A month later, at Friedland, Oudinot and his grenadiers were under Marshal Lannes' command and played a crucial role holding up the Russian army, until Napoleon arrived to deal a decisive blow. During the 1809 war with Austria, Oudinot was wounded once more at the Battle of Aspern. When Marshal Lannes died of his wounds, Napoleon chose Oudinot to succeed him as commander of 2nd Corps. He led his new corps with such success at Wagram 6 weeks later that Napoleon attributed victory to Massena and Oudinot. A week later, he became one of 3 new marshals, one for France, one for the army, one for friendship. Oudinot, the army's choice, fearless and much loved, a man whose courage inspired all around him. He later received an additional reward, the title Duke of Reggio. In 1812, Marshal Oudinot led 2nd Corps into Russia, but was wounded again at Polotsk and handed over command to General Saint-Cyr. 10 weeks later, he was back with his corps, marching south to join up with Napoleon's army on its retreat from Moscow. Oudinot's men were shocked when they saw their old comrades from the main column. They looked more like fugitives than soldiers of the Grande Armée. Since Oudinot's 2nd Corps was in better shape than most, it formed the vanguard for the desperate crossing of the Berezina River. But the next day, in bitter fighting to hold the bridgehead against the Russians, Oudinot was shot from his saddle. He was carried back to a cottage with a serious gunshot wound, but then he and his party became surrounded by Cossacks. Oudinot asked for his pistols, and from his bed, aiming through an opening opposite, began firing at the Cossacks.
Wow.
They were rescued by friendly troops, just in time. Oudinot was back with the Grande Armée in Germany in 1813. In August, Napoleon ordered him to lead an advance on Berlin, but he was defeated by Bernadotte's Army of the North at Grossbeeren. He then retreated in the wrong direction, causing Napoleon to remark, "It's truly difficult to have less brains than the Duke of Reggio." In Oudinot's defense, he'd probably been given an impossible task. Insufficient men to take on a strong opponent, bad weather, terrible roads,
Napoleon
and he
was a
himself
trip.
unwell, possibly not yet recovered from his ordeal in Russia. Napoleon put Oudinot back where he was most effective, leading troops in combat under his close supervision. At Leipzig, he commanded 2 divisions of the Young Guard, engaged in heavy fighting on
You
the
know?
southern front for 2 days.
Some people are best when they take direct orders, you know? This guy, he seems like that was his forte, you know what I mean? He's on the right there under Napoleon. Napoleon tell him, do this, bam, he go do it. You know, ingenuity and stuff doesn't seem to have been his strong suit. Well, of course, they said he left home when he was 17, trying to get away from the family business, so, you know. That may have something to do with it. I'm just speculating, you know what I mean? He didn't get enough schooling to be, you know, ingenuitive. Oh, that's not a word. To be, how should I put it? To take initiative and stuff like that. You know, he just followed orders. You would think Napoleon would like that.
Continued to serve the emperor courageously and loyally as
See?
a corps commander in the final campaign of 1814. But in April, he was one of several marshals to confront Napoleon with the reality of his position and force his abdication. When Napoleon returned from exile in 1815, Oudinot refused to break his new oath to the monarchy, but declared neutrality, telling Napoleon, "Since I shall not serve you,
He was
sir,
smarter than
I
Napoleon
shall serve
thought.
no one." He continued to hold senior commands under the Bourbons. By one estimate, Oudinot was wounded 36 times in his military career, more than any other marshal. Here are just 20 that we found details for. A fellow officer who bathed with him at a spa after the war saw the scars on his body and observed he was little more than a colander. Ironically, Oudinot was also one of the longest-lived marshals, dying aged 80 while serving as governor of Les Invalides.
Marshal Victor.
Marshal Victor.
Victor was better than one might suppose. Ooh, there's no dig there, Napoleon? Okay, let's keep going. Maybe the dig is coming in the story.
Claude Victor Perrin was an experienced soldier by the time of the French Revolution, a sergeant with 8 years' service in the Grenoble artillery regiment. The Revolutionary Wars brought the opportunity for rapid promotion, and by 1793 he was commanding an infantry battalion at the siege of Toulon. He led a daring night assault on the British defences alongside the army's artillery chief, a young Major Bonaparte. Both men were wounded, but the attack was a success, and both were quickly promoted to brigadier general. Victor served under General Bonaparte in Italy and turned out to be a brilliant brigade commander. In 1800, he distinguished himself at the Battle of Marengo, where his command of the left wing won particular praise from Napoleon.
Yeah, Napoleon liked this guy.
But Victor did not hide his disapproval of Napoleon's quest for political power, and as a result, received relatively minor roles under the new regime.
There we go.
In 1802, he was earmarked to lead an expedition to recover the French territory of Louisiana, but it was called off when Napoleon decided instead to sell Louisiana to the United States. Victor and Marshal Lannes were close friends from their days serving together in Italy. In 1806, Lannes persuaded Napoleon to let him have Victor as his new chief of staff for 5th Corps. Napoleon agreed, and in October, Victor served as Lannes' deputy at the Battle of Jena. Napoleon's earlier misgivings about Victor were now forgotten, and that winter he was given command of the newly formed 10th Corps.
My man is moving back up.
He was captured by a Prussian patrol and had to be exchanged for a captured Prussian officer, General von Blücher. His big break came in 1807,
His big break.
stepping in for the wounded Marshal Bernadotte to command 1st Corps at Friedland, where he successfully led a major attack as the Emperor looked on. Promotion to Marshal and the title Duke of Bellumo swiftly followed. In 1808, Marshal Victor and 1st Corps took part in the invasion of Spain, where he'd be posted for the next 3 years. Victor's record in Spain was better than most, but like others, he seemed more interested in personal glory and rewards than in cooperating with fellow commanders. In 1809 at Medellin, he inflicted a crushing defeat on General Cuesta's Spanish army. 4 months later, his bold night attack on the British at Talavera came tantalizingly close to success. He was furious the next day when King Joseph and Marshal Jourdan refused to support fresh attacks and instead ordered a cautious withdrawal.
My man was bloodthirsty.
Besieged the Spanish port of Cadiz. It proved a lengthy, futile operation, devoid of glory, and saw his troops defeated by an Allied sortie at the Battle of Barossa. In 1812, Victor was recalled from Spain for the invasion of Russia. His 9th Corps was held in reserve for most of the campaign, though his troops were kept busy defending depots and convoys from Cossack raids. That autumn, his corps attempted to cover the main army's retreat from Moscow. The greatest crisis of the retreat came at the Berezina River. As the remnants of the Grande Armée began crossing over 2 improvised bridges, Victor's 9th Corps was ordered to form the rearguard. Though heavily outnumbered, Victor skillfully handled his French and German troops, holding the Russians at bay as the army made its escape. He then marched his surviving troops over the bridges in good order, a courageous performance in desperate circumstances. In Germany in 1813, Victor commanded 2nd Corps and led the attack in Napoleon's last great victory at Dresden. His corps was in heavy fighting again at Leipzig 2 months later. Victor continued to serve at the Emperor's side in the defense of France in 1814. By now, like many comrades, he must have been close to physical and psychological exhaustion. Regardless, during the Battle of Montereau, Napoleon let fly at him for failing to get his troops into position and blamed him for the Allies' escape. Victor was relieved of command, but angry and humiliated at what he considered his unfair dismissal, he told the Emperor, "Marshal Victor has not forgotten his old trade. I will shoulder a musket and take my place in the guard." Moved by this response, Napoleon relented and gave Victor command of a corps of young guard. 2 weeks later, he was badly wounded at the Battle of Craonne and took no further part in the war. A month later, Napoleon abdicated, and Victor switched his loyalty to the Bourbon monarchy.
Man, these guys are just switching.
He led an investigation into former comrades who'd supported Napoleon during the 100 Days, and was one of only 2 active marshals to vote for the death penalty for Marshal Ney, a decision he later claimed to regret. Victor later served as Minister of War, but retired from public life in 1830, following the overthrow of the Bourbon monarchy. 10.
You know, in a lot of these here, do you realize how they switch sides? So it's kind of like narcissistic in a certain sense that, well, you know, I want to save my way of life. I want to save my reputation. I want to save my, you know, my how should I put this? My the way people see me in this land. So, you know, they go from Napoleon to the royal family, and then some of them even try to go back to Napoleon because they kind of fought with him, so they know how strong he could be, thinking that quite possibly he could just run ramshot again and have all of Europe, and they could, you know, enjoy the spoils. But it's just funny how but then that's politics. That is politics. And how do you trust somebody who fought for the dude before? It's just crazy how, you know, their loyalty is just, you know, after Napoleon is gone, the loyalty is just shifted back and forth.
Marshal Murat.
I cannot conceive how so brave a man could be so unreliable. He was only brave when facing the enemy. In council, he was a fool with no judgment. Man probably didn't like politics, Napoleon.
Joachim Murat, the son of an innkeeper, was destined for a career in the church, but dropped out of college and joined a cavalry regiment instead. To his immense frustration, he saw little action in the early years of the Revolutionary Wars, being stuck with staff and training roles. But in 1795, while stationed in Paris with the 21st Chasseurs, fate intervened. A young general, Napoleon Bonaparte, had been put in charge of the defense of the National Convention. With a mob poised to storm the building, he ordered Captain Murat to bring him cannons, which he did, racing the guns through the city streets, allowing Napoleon to mow down the mob with a famous whiff of grape shot. Napoleon was hailed as the saviour of the government and rewarded with command of the army of Italy. Murat was promoted colonel and went with him as his new aide-de-camp. He soon made a name for himself as a bold and brilliant leader of cavalry, while his 6-foot height, curly locks and love of women ensured fame as France's foremost beau sabreur.
Beau sabreur.
In 1798,
Wait. Beau sabreur, what does that
Napoleon's
mean?
expedition to
Hold on.
Egypt.
I'm going to go back here.
While his 6-foot height, curly locks and love of women ensured fame as France's foremost beau sabreur.
Ooh, dashing swordsman.
In 1798, Murat joined Napoleon's expedition to Egypt. At the Battle of Abu Qir, his flanking charge broke the enemy, and Murat personally took the Ottoman commander prisoner, despite being shot in the jaw, a wound which, to his immense relief, did not ruin his looks. Back in Paris, Napoleon launched his coup d'etat to seize political power. When he got a hostile reception from the Council of 500, it was Murat who saved the day, leading troops in to clear the chamber, shouting, "Citizens, you have been dissolved," before adding something a bit more coarse. His place at the future emperor's side was further assured when he married Napoleon's youngest sister, Caroline, in 1800. Later that year, he commanded the French cavalry reserve at Marengo and helped Napoleon to win a decisive victory over the Austrians. When Napoleon established his empire in 1804, Murat became a marshal, second in seniority only to Berthier. He'd later also received the title Prince of the Empire and the rank of Grand Admiral.
Man, look at the stuff they wear, man. It's like a costume.
Napoleon's cavalry reserve. His excellent reconnaissance and diversions proving crucial in the encirclement of General Mack's
And you know,
Austrian army at Ulm.
you know he fancified a lot of his stuff since he thinks he's the dashing swordsman, you know what I mean? So you know he was impeccable in his dress and everything, you know what I mean? Yeah, whatever accessories could be put on his attire, he probably put it on there.
3 weeks later, Murat and Marshal Lannes, who normally couldn't stand each other, together bluffed an Austrian commander into surrendering a vital bridge by persuading him that an armistice had been signed when it hadn't. It was a bold stunt, but overall Napoleon was not impressed by Murat's pursuit of the enemy. "I cannot approve your manner of march. You go on like a stunned fool, taking not the least notice of my orders."
Napoleon wanted complete
Yet in
control.
battle, Murat remained a brilliant and inspiring leader, as demonstrated at Austerlitz. And the next year,
You know,
at
actually, checking out the Marshals, it seems like this was sort of really chaotic, you know. In certain parts, they didn't follow his orders and stuff like that. It seems like he didn't have complete and utter control of the people that he commanded. Some of them did their own thing, And then when they won, he go, hi, cool. You know, it's kind of like, you know, me being 7'1", when I chuck up a 3-pointer, the coach go, oh my God, no, no, no. And it went and he go, oh, good job. Seems like a lot of that happened back then.
Jena, where he led the decisive charge, wielding only his riding crop. The next year, at Eylau, with the Russians poised to break through his centre, Napoleon ordered Murat to lead a mass cavalry charge straight at the enemy. Murat's men succeeded and saved the army from disaster, though at a terrible price in men and horses. Napoleon had rewarded Murat in 1806 by making him sovereign prince of the Grand Duchy of Berg. In 1808, he sent Murat to Spain to act as his representative. Spain was still a French ally, but in May, Napoleon's heavy-handed meddling in Spanish affairs triggered a ferocious backlash. Madrid rose up against the French garrison, and Murat's troops fought back with brutal force, killing around 200, executing 300 more.
Woo!
When Napoleon deposed Spain's Bourbon monarchy, Murat hoped he'd be made the new king of Spain. But that title went to Napoleon's brother, Joseph.
Nepotism, people.
Murat instead received the throne of Naples. If it felt like second prize, it wasn't bad going for an innkeeper's son, college dropout, and ex-cavalry trooper. Napoleon expected Murat to merely represent his interests in Naples, but Murat had other ideas. He reformed the Neapolitan army, equipping it with splendid new uniforms, and turned a blind eye to smuggling, which undermined Napoleon's economic war against Britain, the so-called continental system. Relations between Murat and the emperor became strained. But when Napoleon began planning to invade Russia in 1812, only Murat would do to lead his cavalry. Their differences were put to one side. Murat took command of 4 cavalry corps and became Napoleon's second in command. During the advance into Russia, Murat's cavalry faced a difficult and frustrating task, trying to locate the enemy in a vast landscape. Horses died in their thousands from poor fodder and exhaustion, and they faced a dangerous and wily opponent in Russia's Cossacks. Murat, always riding with the advance guard, was so fearless and conspicuous in his extravagant uniforms that the Cossacks came to admire him, calling out "Hurrah, Murat!" whenever they saw him, and hoped to capture him alive if possible. Murat was one of those who tried to persuade Napoleon to
Come here,
halt the
boy.
advance at Smolensk, but was ignored. At the great clash between the French and Russian armies at Oudinot, Murat was at his best, directing a series of attacks on the Russian earthworks, always where the action was hottest, inspiring all with his courage. Murat remained with the army during the retreat from Moscow, though his magnificent cavalry had virtually ceased to exist. One eyewitness noted that throughout the ordeal, he never neglected his appearance. Even at the Berezina, he looked splendid.
Man was vain.
An open-necked shirt, velvet cloak, a white feather in his cap. When Napoleon left the army to return to Paris, he gave command to Marshal Murat. But Murat, now primarily concerned with hanging on to his kingdom, left the army a month later and returned to Naples, where he opened secret negotiations with the coalition. He offered to join the war against Napoleon if the other powers would let him keep his crown. But he received only a lukewarm response. So in 1813, when Napoleon asked Murat to join him in Germany to fight for their thrones together, he answered the call.
I'm telling you, man.
Increasingly difficult to work with, oversensitive about his royal status, prone to tantrums, but in battle as fearless as ever. At Dresden, his charge through rain and mud shattered the Austrian left wing and paved the way for victory. But then at Liebertwolkwitz, He showed his limitations when not under Napoleon's direct command, getting drawn into a major and unnecessary cavalry battle with coalition forces, and twice nearly being captured himself. 2 days later, at the Battle of Leipzig, he led another of history's great cavalry charges, coming close to breaking the enemy's centre and even capturing the Allied monarchs. But it was not to be. The Battle of the Nations ended in a disastrous defeat. As Napoleon retreated to the French frontier, Murat informed the emperor that he was leaving for Naples, promising to raise fresh troops. Murat and Napoleon would never meet again. 3 months later, the King of Naples had cut a deal with the coalition and switched sides. So long as it was possible for me to believe that the Emperor Napoleon was fighting to bring peace and glory to France, I fought loyally at his side.
Oh, please, you're politicking.
But now I know that the Emperor's sole desire is war. However, Murat's commitment to the Sixth Coalition was distinctly half-hearted. His army marched against Eugene's forces in northern Italy, but had done no actual fighting before news arrived of Napoleon's abdication. Murat then began to suspect what had been obvious to Napoleon at least. The coalition was not going to honor its promise, and Murat would be next to lose his throne. So, in 1815, encouraged by news of Napoleon's return from exile, Murat marched north against the Austrians, proclaiming a war for Italian freedom and independence. Just 7 weeks later, his campaign ended in defeat at the Battle of Tolentino. With the British and Austrians closing in, Murat became a hunted fugitive. He sailed to France, but Napoleon had not forgiven his betrayal and refused to see him. After Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo, he fled to Corsica, gathered a small band of volunteers, and returned to Italy in a hopelessly doomed attempt to start a revolution and reclaim his throne. Chased by a mob and arrested on the beach, Murat was sentenced to death by the restored Bourbon monarchy of Naples. He met his end with his usual courage, telling the firing squad, "If you wish to spare me, aim at the heart," then gave the order to fire himself.
Wow. To the end, my man was narcissistic.
Murat is rightly remembered as one of the great battlefield cavalry commanders of history. Inspirational, fearless, with brilliant tactical instinct. But outside of combat, he was, in Napoleon's estimation, a very poor general. He always waged war without maps. Worse, when the conflict turned against France, he allowed self-interest and vanity to prevail over loyalty to the emperor. As Napoleon's chief of staff, Marshal Berthier, once told him, "You're only a king by the grace of Napoleon and French blood. It's black ingratitude that's blinding you." Saint-Cyr, Oudinot, Victor, Murat. 17 down, 9 to go. Join us for part 4 when we'll continue the countdown. Coming soon.
I'll be honest with you, man. I still like Marmont. But this last guy here, Murat, he was pretty good now. He was pretty good. It's crazy that he got executed there because he tried to start a revolution in Italy. His vanity, man, was off the charts, you know what I mean? He got appointed by Napoleon, turned on Napoleon, tried to get back with Napoleon. When that didn't work, went back to Italy and tried to start his own revolution so he could keep face. It's crazy, but he was interesting too, but I'm still a Marmont man. Anyway, thank you all for listening or watching this with me, fam, if I may. You know what I mean? Remember to keep commenting below. And as always, the link will always be in the description for these videos. I may not say that in every video, but it will always be in the bottom. Go to these channels, check out the stuff they have because they have a lot more than I could ever react to. And you could see all of this, okay? Y'all take care of each other, all right? Cool runnings.